Welcome to the Deeptech Nation Forum, the platform for interviews with key people of the Swiss technology ecosystem. Listen in and get to know their personal stories, experience and vision for the Switzerland of tomorrow.
Welcome to the Deeptech Forum. My name is Tina Willibald and I have the pleasure to welcome today Stefan Kuentz, investment partner at Swisscom Ventures. Welcome, Stefan.
Thanks for having me, Tina.
Pleasure having you here. So we would like to get to know you better as a person. I know you started at the beginning of your career, you started in a startup, then moved to big corporates. You worked for IBM, then many years within Swisscom. I know you since many years. I remember you working at Swisscom Outpost, being manager of Swisscom Outpost, always bringing the newest, fanciest innovations and the coolest contacts also for us when we went to Silicon Valley. So it was an exciting time.
Yeah, indeed, it was.
and since several years now, partner at Swisscom Ventures, moving back to the financing the startups. So yeah, we start with you as a person. So who are you?
Who am I? Oh, that's kind of a deep question.
Yeah, the philosophical.
So, my name is Stefan Kuentz, and I'm 55. I grew up in Basel, so I'm Swiss, and I'm kind of most of the time I lived in Switzerland just because of it's a great country to live in, I would say. But we also had an excursus. I can cover that later, to the US then with the whole family. Mm-hmm. We still live close by to Basel. We live in a town called Möhlin. That's more closer to the Rhine. It's more outside. It's more in the nature. We felt like that's good for the kids. So we have 2 kids, and we have a second place, by the way, in Ticino, which is kind of the resort where we go to if we want to kind of have some more peaceful thinking. That's where my wife comes from. That's close to Locarno.
I remember in COVID, since the COVID times,
well,
when we have our team calls and seeing you when being in Ticino, totally relaxed and fully concentrated.
That's the advantage. Home office can be anywhere, right? Well, there has to be advantage with COVID. Yeah.
Looking back to your career, what were experiences from an entrepreneurial side that you would like to share with young startups now, learnings you had or highlights?
Oh, there's a lot, I would say. Well, first of all, I think start doing what you feel passionate about. I think that's the key ingredient of what you do. And in my case, the question was when I started to think about what I should do in life and where should I work with, for whom should I work, in what industry. I mean, it was naturally that I felt like, I have to pick something, right? And my father, he comes out of construction business, and he always said, you don't go into construction, too much crisis. I remember that. That was in the 70s, 80s, think about. So I felt like, okay, that's not what I should do. And then I remember when I was school, and we got these kind of cubicle Macintosh computers, and I felt like, wow, that's cool stuff. And so that was kind of when I started saying, this is it. I should be programming this machine. I should be just kind of doing something around that. And then it was for me clear, I go into IT industry. I want to be in the IT industry. And then I had this chance to join actually a smaller company. So, I must say, I sent also application to the bigger ones, but that was kind of not so easy to get in at this time. So I joined a smaller one company, and it was about actually big computers. That was interesting. So it was really about big data centers. So at that time, you didn't call this a startup. It was a smaller company, but a kind of growing company. And we developed software for data centers about, making them more efficient, doing night shifts, so actually making night shifts obsolete. And then also about managing those data centers from a software perspective. So I did that, and I was joyful. That was really kind of, I would say, startup experience. But having said that, as with many startups and many companies, we grew and we just kind of did not everything right. And there was some disruption in the market, and all of a sudden cash went out. And I had to look for a new job. So as naturally things happen. And then I felt like, this time it has to be a bigger company. For sure. And that's how I got into the corporate life world of corporate life. I said, it has to be the biggest that we have. And that was IBM. And IBM was truly amazing at that time because, there was 350,000 employees. There was really career paths in this company. And you could gain international experiences. Travel a lot, which I feel like very addicted by at these times. So I did kind of the typical evolution from marketing sales. And then at the end, I ended up in consulting services. I was also at the end on an associate partner level, running IT strategy consulting. And also at that time was a lot about innovation in corporates and consulting companies. And there was a kind of stage where, I got approached by Swisscom, essentially, and asking I would join Swisscom. And I felt like, why not? It's more Swiss, it's more Switzerland. And job that was offered to me was building in the B2B, in the enterprise space, new kind of business silos, starting from consulting, then going into services. Not just only consulting, but really integrated solution business. So at that time, Swisscom was very much service-driven from the infrastructure side and from the telecom kind of networking side. So it was really the belief we need a solution business. So that was kind of a challenge because I started with me, and then I was asked, could you just bring this up? And build the unit, build the unit, build several. So at the end, it was, that was, really great experience. It was building, let's say, dedicated smaller units within a big corporation, however, and all had to start from the beginning.
So it's having a startup in a big environment.
It was kind of a startup avenue, I would say, and this is where I start to realize, actually, this is what I'm best at. Not the guy that builds the business, but the guy that plants the seed for the business. Just kind of gets the right people in and gets the leader in that will be heading the unit or the business, and then provides the environment. And in the corporate, a lot about shielding in the environment, protecting the seeds that they're kind of not getting this kind of tiered out, more or less, I would say. So it was more about, really providing the environment and also, giving the right ingredients to build the business. So at the end, this was almost 100 people. And there were 4 units. And one was in security, one was in contact center services, one was in event management, which was actually something that what Swisscom had already, that were moved into the unit. So things, naturally evolved from the point where we started.
Now it's in the enterprise customer area.
So it was all about enterprise customers, all about B2B, and it was solution business, but we also brought services to the markets. For instance, in the contact center space, it was about managed contact center service. It was actually very, very new at that time. Yeah. So and then the next step was
the outpost, right?
Was, as you mentioned, yeah. And that was kind of a coincidence, I must say, because I had an assignment to go there to just get to know what they do, and so I went there, and I feel like, wow. This is a completely different environment, and that the whole atmosphere and the vibe that you have in the valleys, I feel super attracted by. And I wasn't really counting that there is a job opening there, but as things happen, there was one. I was sensing it when I was there, that there might be a job.
There was destiny.
There was destiny. So there was a change in the outpost organization,
Ursula
was leaving. Ursula
Right.
was heading the outpost in Silicon. She was leaving. She was kind of doing the same in Asia, and this job was to be taken. Was there, so I took it, and yeah, that was a great step from also an experience point of view.
Yeah.
Certainly, it was not the same. I mean, here it was more like managing, and all of a sudden it was about being part of the biggest innovation ecosystem.
The innovation
in the world.
party.
Yeah, innovation, and
Wow.
that was a great experience. Yeah.
Yeah. So what, thinking back to your years in the Silicon Valley and the Swisscom outpost, what were the great experiences or and also the differences to Switzerland, to your job here in the enterprise area?
I mean, there's so much to say about that. I think what is truly amazing was really that the people are all coming out of your industry, and they're all, and this mentality which was in the valley, I mean, which still is this can-do kind of spirit. You can do everything, and it's all about the world. And
it's not
and
there,
also
and there is a
getting
problem, and why not?
And this atmosphere, and also to connect with people. It's amazing how fast you can. I remember these gatherings you have. You just go to a gathering. So there it's about, you talk to the people you don't know. You don't talk to the people you know. And in our culture, it's more like you talk to the people you know, and you don't talk to the people you don't know.
Yeah.
So and kind of this vibe, and which very much was which I think culture-wise it was just kind of a difference. And then to really connect with the companies there, to build a relationship, to build network, and Valley is all about the network as such. And you help somebody, somebody helps you. So that's how I also got into the venturing industry, to get to know VCs, to help one portfolio companies by helping the VC. I mean, with my judgment, but on the other end also bringing them into Swisscom. I remember visiting the company at the garage in the back door somewhere in the Bay Area, and the company had just built 3 roadsters, and it was really a backdoor garage, and you can guess who was that, at that time, and that imagine, how big
Elon?
Tesla has become. No, it was not with Elon, but it was at the garage. I mean, that would, and when we saw them building the cars, there were 3 roadsters at that time. And
So
now think about how big the company is nowadays. Yeah.
Who was it then?
No, we were just invited to visit the plant and what they built there.
But it was Tesla.
It was Tesla.
It was Tesla at that time.
It was Tesla.
Wow. So you were one of the very first.
So we had the chance to look, it was 2007, into how they built the cars there.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine how big Tesla is now and how successful.
And you couldn't really, imagine how big these companies become. Also, I had first kind of meetings with Box.net, for instance. And there's many companies you met at these days, and you still meet, that are small, and all of a sudden it becomes very big. Yeah.
So, are there learnings from that time when Tesla was really small, and an idea of like some geeks and crazy ideas and visionaries that you could transfer to today, nowadays, to Switzerland?
Yeah, I think so. The Simon had an end at the end, because Swisscom employees not sent for good to this job. So
you needed to come back.
So you needed to come back, yeah. No. So and from that perspective, there was one thing that really fascinated me when I was there, was the whole evolution about the cloud. So that was the beginning of the cloud, and Amazon just kind of get into the market and with cloud. There were a lot of startups, and I think we also connected this back to Swisscom, and we were launching actually the first cloud deployment. It was very small at that time.
The Swisscom Cloud.
At the Swisscom Cloud, it was, I would say, 0.1. So it was on a storage layer, and it was a compute layer with startup technology from the Valley, and that was kind of brought me back. And when I came back to Switzerland, there was actually only one spot I could work. I was at the venturing team, because I could leverage a little bit what I've done there and what I've learned there, and also the connection to all these VCs. And I was already kind of collaborating with Dominic at that time.
Which is a huge asset because of your connections to the Silicon Valley. We got into excellent deals, like the Fastly deal. And
that was later, though, you know. But at the end, it was many deals were based on, and still are on the relationship I have from these times. So this is great. You know, this is the advantage of our industry. So people are in these jobs for a longer period of time. I mean, at least for a cycle of a fund, 10 years or even more. So people you get to know, I mean, you know, and they're staying in the position for much longer, and you know them for much longer because you have connection. So I could kind of do a couple of deals. I mean, particularly on cloud infrastructure, storage, orchestration, telecom kind of infrastructure things, and a couple of things. So I did many of the US deals for quite some time, but within Swisscom Ventures, mainly my kind of where I'm coming from, it's around IT though. But I shifted, let's say, so towards 2016, more towards also Swiss investments. I wanted to do more in Switzerland. I mean, there was also the strategy to do much more in Switzerland. So I did a couple of deals in Switzerland. I mean, Bexia was one, for example. Exascale was all about, you know, software as a service, IT, B2B, and the cloud. So I still kind of love this topic, because I see this as a big disruption, really, if not the biggest in B2B.
That's exactly would have been my questions, like learning from Tesla now. So what do you see, what areas do you see in Switzerland that have a huge potential, or where you see opportunity?
Yeah, Switzerland, I mean, so I believe, you know, the Swiss ecosystem as such has tremendously evolved, the startup ecosystem, over the last 10 years since I'm back. I mean, I was also invited at the beginning when I was in the US actually to join jury sessions. And if I compare what I saw that time and what I see today, it's so different, you know. And I mean, the ecosystem has evolved in terms of that it is much more activity. There's much more infrastructure to kind of bring startups to life. And there's also from the talent pool that is kind of coming from the universities, much more diversity, which I think is a very important factor, because diversity and teams that are not just only Swiss, they're really coming from everywhere, where really, I mean, the big corporates like Google attracting talents to Switzerland, the universities attracting talents. That's actually, I think, the ingredient for building great companies.
So it's a very international...
It's a very international, I mean, that's what we see, a very international crowd. I mean, a lot of experience. I think at the end, at the heart of any venture, it's the human being. I mean, people tend to forget that, and that's also where we invest. And at the end, we invest in human being and people. And the success is about attracting first the talents and the people, and making sure that they have the right environment. So I believe we have done quite significant steps in that direction, but I see also challenges. So we have a very strong ecosystem around pharma, I would say. I mean, kind of exclude that, but around really building the next big companies in Switzerland on the digitalization side. I think this is probably a challenge going forward that we have to overcome, in my view, because at the end, you know, what you see is, thanks to the cloud, the evolution of the cloud. I mean, you see all these massive big tech companies kind of going into a lot of spots and actually becoming so big that it's very difficult to really encounter new space. And I think there is a chance still for companies to get into spaces where, I mean, kind of categories, I would call them, where they can still make a bet. And that's actually also still the chance for Europe. I mean, Europe somehow missed a little bit, I mean, kind of the evolution of the digitalization, but I think there's really still potential to grab these categories. And I think what we have to do is actually work on these in Switzerland. and build those categories.
Yeah, coming back to the areas you just mentioned, could you name some of them you have in mind?
Well, sure. So I believe, first of all, I kind of step back again, also about the ecosystem, where I feel like that we need to build. I mean, at the end, it's about the soil, where you plant the seeds on, and then the seeds are kind of growing. And I believe, that in Switzerland, as I said initially, there's a lot happening, but what I do still think is needed is besides the talents that in the middle, is we have to bring back more like the serial entrepreneurs. So that's something.
Serial entrepreneurs, yeah.
Serial entrepreneurs, those who help the company. If you look into the US, I mean, there's many companies being built also on the fact that there was a lot of supporters and helpers, and I still believe, and those who've done it. So I still believe this is a very important ingredient to have in Switzerland. And also companies that have become big at these days, they had supporters and often serial entrepreneurs in the back. Okay. And that's one thing I kind of feel like this is important, that we need more kind of to build on. And then the other area, I think, is the corporates, the involvement of the corporate. So look, that I still feel like the corporates as such, they see this startup ecosystem as something that is interesting, but they don't kind of involve themselves. I believe in order to push innovation, corporates need to really be more engaged in Switzerland, particularly, even the bigger one. One example, why are we not number 2 or 3 in the smartwatch industry? So I mean, we should be on the map, And I mean, we do have startups here, but I don't see the corporates engaging here. I mean, they can buy companies. I mean, necessarily they don't need to be involved from the beginning, but then buy the companies and make them very big, use your channels. I still believe a lot of corporates in Switzerland, they feel like innovation has to come from internal sources rather than from outside. So, and that's something we have to work on, because at the end, that will be a strength for Switzerland, where we just bring capital, more capital, by the way, startup companies, the talents in the middle, and the corporates into one ecosystem. So, and then coming back to your question, so I still believe, I mean, naturally things that where you have the necessary foundation. Back to the corporates, where you really have a lot of knowledge in that space, and you have the talent pools. So everything around medtech is an area I believe it's. But I'm talking about more about IT things than about drug development and things like that.
Why are we talking about technology? The
technology enablement, digitalization in the technology. So I believe a cluster is a very big one. It will be, and is naturally is the medtech cluster. I do believe that another one I see is really about kind of placing bets in the cloud space, where Switzerland can be a leader. So we just invested in one company. At the core is at the end the deep tech. In that case, it's the technology, the scanning technology. The company is called Scanning, which then built out to become a platform. And the platform is, as such, something that then you can create a category in that space. And in this case, I mean, this evolves really on a global space. So we can do more of this, and these kind of where naturally you have an implanted deep tech kind of technology, and you build a platform and grow this internationally. And there's categories that I believe out of Switzerland can be anchored globally, yeah. And
Scannet is a Swiss company?
It is a Swiss company, born in Switzerland, Swiss team.
Truly Swiss?
Truly Swiss, out of ETH, a serial entrepreneur was involved in. So it was a kind of a typical story that we should have more of them in Switzerland. And still I think the growing companies in Switzerland are still kind of needing to go for money outside of Switzerland. So I still believe we have to build also on that side a stronger, much more closer interlink. If you compare to the US, I mean, the venture capital is among each other. They're much closer linked to each other, and go much faster than than here in Switzerland. So I believe more capital from more VCs and from more sources, and to finance the company with more Swiss money. That is a very important ingredient.
But how come that doesn't happen today? Because Switzerland is such a rich country. There's so much money available. So why do startups that really grow they find the money outside of Switzerland?
I believe it's an evolution question as well. Think about our ecosystem is only 15 years old, huh? And compared to other ecosystems like Silicon Valley, 40 years old. So venturing has or had in those countries a much different weight than it has or still has in Switzerland. I think people just have to come to realize how important is venturing in an industry, and how important is venturing to fuel innovation. And I think there's still not everyone is onboarded on that. And we just have to evolve from that. But I think things are coming together. We just need time. But certainly, going back to the corporates themselves have to realize that and put much more emphasis on it.
There's a need to act.
To act, I believe so, yes. Because innovation has to come to a certain extent from outside, from these companies.
If you would have a free wish for Switzerland, what would you like to change or wish for or create? Is there a vision you have for Switzerland?
Yeah, we should be the hotspot on a European landscape as a country, not like Berlin, but as a country. We should be the hotspot for really innovation in the deep tech space. I think that's something where also the corporates are embracing it and growing with these companies, either companies or with the innovation, and creating work spaces in Switzerland. I think that's important. Just doesn't kind of help to sell the companies eventually abroad. We really have to create the wealth and the workspaces
here in Switzerland. Yeah. And I experienced the Swiss and also even Swiss startups as very humble. So maybe learn also from your Silicon Valley colleagues, thinking big and being more proud and thinking big and making something out of it. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Pleasure to talk.
It was a pleasure.
Pleasure talking to you. And we are looking forward to more interviews to come, and thank you for watching.
In the Swisscom Ventures Deeptech Nation Forum, we talk to some of Switzerland's most influential people in the high-tech sector. Together, we are shaping Switzerland's future.